Hi and welcome to the next step in my preparations for the Grand Tournament, and the first one that's going up back on Thete Gaming channel. And I've actually this weekend been watching some games. At the first heats, I am going to the second heats of the Grand Tournament in May, but the first heats were this weekend, and I've been watching a few games. And I saw a spectacular piece of good sportsmanship in it as well. But the next video in this series is going to be talking about that and things I've learnt by watching that. But in this one, I did say when I started this series, by the end of February, I'm going to have decided or made some decision about what army to take, because I'm only going to have 2 months left. In fact, there's 2 months this weekend left for me to get it ready, because that's when I go. And I need to paint it, and I don't like painting. And even, it was quite funny. There was one guy that we were watching the game of, a Stormcast Eternals player, who'd painted their entire army in the last 3 days. They were putting it, and it looked very good as well. And they described it as the list they wanted to make. They only needed one more unit for it, but I think they'd have had trouble matching the colour scheme or something like that. So they just thought, well, I'll just paint a whole new one. I'm not that productive with it. And I don't want to make a very rough and ready job of it either, because, you know, the quality of the painting of it is important. I mean, it doesn't have to be superbly well painted, but there's a certain standard. And I would like to do it slightly above my normal tabletop standard as well. So I came up with 3 lists: Legions of Asgore, Maggotkin of Nurgle, and Legion of Nagash. And I had to make a decision, because I can't make all 3 and get some practice games in. So let us head into the maelstrom of what I decided. So the first one up, I was talking about a Legions of Asgore list. I like this idea. This is a Forge World list. The downsides to it very much were, first of all, the entire army will be resin, and this is a horrible thing to use. It's absolutely dreadful. It particularly annoys me from Forge World that the models are all resin and you pay a fortune for them. And I know sort of economies of scale are at work here, but it's spectacularly annoying. Now, I had a little question here. So someone's saying, I have a very similar list, blah, 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 blah. I prefer the magma cannons as guaranteed mortal wounds at 24-inch range, something which changes people's battle plans. I take an iron... I'll do that one first of all. So what I responded to that actually was... So if you can see in my list, I've got 3 rocket launchers, 1 magma cannon. What that was... yes, the magma cannon with the mortal wounds thing, good. The rocket launcher, though, I have this big fear of monsters, like proper monsters, like Nagash. I have a particular fear of coming up against Nagash. And it's disappointing to me that of the 5 games I watched this weekend on Warhammer TV, unfortunately... Well, not only were none of them Legions of Nagash, but none of them included Nagash. I really wanted to see a game against Nagash with good players. But that was the fear. See, Nagash has a 4-up save. A 3-up save, sorry, but a 4-up save against mortal wounds. So against the mortal wounds, it's just 4-up save. So for every... You need to do 2 mortal wounds statistically to cause 1 wound of damage on him. But the rocket launcher, like a lot of these things, just does normal damage with a rend feature. So, you know, that it sort of works out as good or better, depending on the... Your rend only has to be -2 before all of a sudden it's better and more likely to cause its normal wounds, and it does more wounds. And for the price, because normally mortal wounds are way better than normal wounds, you're paying a premium for that as well. So those that artillery battalion, yes, of course, I'll fire it at whatever I think is the most dangerous unit for my opponent, but ultimately it's included for the things I fear, which generally are things that are pretty good against mortal wounds. Then the next one about Iron Demon. Yes, that's fine. You know, very nasty as well. I think, is that the one I was looking... There was one, actually, I was looking at, but you can't get the model anymore. I wonder if that was it. I can't remember. But, just to move this message away, part of the decision I've made is not to go with Legions of Asgore. Reasoning being, not that I'm looking at it and thinking, oh no, I don't think it'd be very good. I would really like to play it, but it's massively expensive. Now, if I'd have just spent the money on this and nothing else, then that'd be fine. But in actual fact, I'm getting all sorts of things at the moment because I want to play so many armies. So there's that side of it. It would cost a lot of money, And the other thing is, I'm having to work with resin. It takes longer, therefore, to clean and assemble the models. And I just looked at it and I thought, it could take me, I could be pushing it, getting it all done. I would get it done, but would I get it done quickly enough to be able to get some practice games in? I'm sort of thinking, probably not. So it is one I want to do, but I think it's more for the future. If I qualify from the heats and get into the final, maybe it's one to take along to the final. Who knows? I did notice on Warhammer TV when they were reading out the list, there was one Legion of Asgore player. So hopefully at some point I'll be able to see the full results and see how they did. But, you know, that is that decision made. So on to the other two. So Maggotkin of Nurgle. This is what I was looking at. Rotigus, Great Unclean One, the Glotkin as my characters, all double wizards. So or each of them got their own individual spell. So 6 spells I can be thrown out there without having to rely on having to cast a Mystic Shield or a Arcane Bolt. Putrid Blight Kings, Chaos Warriors, and a Chimera, and of course a big old block of Plague Bearers. So I had a little comment about this one before I explain about this one as well. It says, what about swapping the Chimera with a Soul Grinder? I have thought about this. In fact, recently I was actually suggesting to someone else that in their Siege army they should take a Soul Grinder. Really good. This is a Soul Grinder. So here's their War Scroll. Now, what I particularly like about the Soul Grinder is that they have some missile attacks. You can sort of have them hanging around a rear guard objective, almost just to guard it. And the person I was talking to and suggesting they take it, they were arguing, yeah, but it does most of its damage in close combat. Do you really want to just stand this on objective somewhere? Well, technically no. But the problem with many of the battle plans is you might need to leave something on an objective to keep hold of it. And something like this has the advantage of being able to do that, but also fire pot shots at things. So it can do some damage as well. And if anything, and at some point, if your opponent is going to beat you, they've got to, you would think, get within range of it anyway. So it's going to find itself in combat. But of course, you don't have to do it, for that depends on the battle plan. You could also have it accompany whatever's capturing the middle objectives, if there's objectives in the middle or something like that. Maybe accompany the Blight Kings. You know, it is really nice. Don't get me wrong. If I was just making a list purely to be really strong, I think I would almost certainly take a Soul Grinder. Absolutely. And you know, the reason not, well, first of all, it's not quite the same. It's slightly more points than a Chimera as well. You couldn't just do a straight swap. I'm just going to get rid of this. You couldn't just do a straight swap. So what I'd have to do in actual fact probably is to knock down the Chaos Warriors to another unit of Blight Kings and take it. And that, you know, that'd be okay. I'd be okay with that. The alternative is doing something with one of my characters, maybe knocking the Glotkin down to another Great Unclean One, or changing it to something completely different. You know, like Chaos Sorcerer Lord or Manticore or something like that, as a possibility. So I'd have to rearrange something else. But yes, it would certainly be possible. The fact of the matter is, though, I just really want a Chimera. Ever since the Beast of Chaos book came out, I just thought, I want a Chimera. And as I'm not making a Beast of Chaos list, you know, about having Maggotkin of Nurgle army, I thought they can have that as an ally. I'll have that. So that's the thinking. Like I said, I'm not just about trying to make what I think is the strongest list. I'm not experienced enough to expect to be able to win or place very, very highly. I would like to place in the top third. I'm not even expecting that because I have... And I think one thing that showed me when I looked at the games today, and I identified this months ago. This is why I keep getting the battle tomes to try and read them and learn them. It's absolutely vital that you know what your opponent's forces can do so that you can predict what they're going to do. And I haven't yet got the experience of that. Although I've got the books, keep reading them. It's much easier to get into your head when you see these things in practice. And I'm not part of a large Age of Sigmar scene where I live, so I don't get to see a lot of this. So I'm not going to be experienced or knowledgeable enough to be able to do very well. So absolute minimum, I need to play a list that I'm also going to enjoy playing. I need to enjoy the event for what it is. And I will love to have a Chimera. But with the Maggotkin of Nurgle, I'm not saying that I'm not taking Maggotkin of Nurgle, but it is not the one I have selected. The one I have selected is Legions of Nagash. But the Maggotkin of Nurgle is going to be my backup because I have the vast majority of it painted already. The only thing I need to do, I need to paint 30 Plague Bearers. I've got those ready now, and I do a pretty quick job of those. The Chimera, I've got the Chimera. I need to assemble and paint that. And one little hero, just in case I want to summon a hero for maybe a 3 places of power or something like that. So I can have that painted fairly quickly, and then it's an army that is ready to go if I don't get this one done in time. So what would stop me getting this one done in time? It's a few things. First of all, it all has to be done from scratch. I don't have any Legions of Nagash stuff ready yet. I have some Nighthaunt units painted, but because I'm going to paint them with a different colour scheme, I would get different ones if I were to include them in this. The list I've got behind me here is subtly different to the one I was actually talking about a week or two ago. The changes in it are, I realised what I originally had, I've now forgotten what I originally had Prince Vordry, which is a named Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. I've swapped that for a normal Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon and upgraded what I did have as Black Knights to Hexwraiths. The reason being, the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon is point for point as good value, in fact very slightly better, but as good value pretty much as Prince Vordry. But Hexwraiths are way better value than Black Knights are. There was a 40-point difference either way. Hexwraiths are more survivable, the better save, and of course Nighthaunt, so their save can't be modified, so they've only got a real fear of mortal wounds. They're also more destructive, they just straight up do more damage. The only time Black Knights do decent damage is on a charge. After that, they're fairly weak. Hexwraiths, the charge bonus they get is if they move across a unit, they get to do mortal wounds to it on the roll of a 5 up for each one. So if I have my 5 Hexwraiths, if I want to move within 3 inches, getting ready for a charge, but let's say I've got way more movement available to me, I can move up to that unit, sort of fly over it, and then go backwards 3 inches away. And for every Hexwraith that did that, and if there's 5 in the unit, it'd be 5. I roll a die, and every 5 up is a mortal wound. So, but not even taking that into account, just from their normal damage, they generally are going to do more damage than Black Knights. So it's a much better unit to take, more defensible and more offensible as well. So that seemed to me a bit of a no-brainer. Other than that, it's sort of the same. Now, there are variants of this that I have been mulling over. But before I do that, it's relevant to this question, so I'll just go through this one as well. Someone said, with the Vampire Lord, which I don't have here, because when we're talking about Vampire Lord for this particular statement, they mean the Vampire Lord on... Well, it doesn't have to be on foot, but it's just the Vampire Lord, not the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. The bigger benefit is putting Blood Feast, which is a command ability, on your 40 block of Chain Rasps for +1 attack until your next hero phase. And stuff like that. That's a really powerful ability, absolutely. And I had thought of a variation. But, and of course, although, say there's no Chain Rasp here, the Skeleton Warriors, 40 Skeleton Warriors is the same number of points as 40 Chain Rasp Horde. So I could easily, and I'm still considering this, swap out one of those blocks for Chain Rasp Horde. Pros and cons. The Skeleton Warriors will get in loads more attacks. They're spearmen. They will, they get in I will be rolling ridiculous numbers of dice. They'll have a lot of attacks. The Chain Rasp Horde won't, because it's only the ones in base contact that will be able to attack, because they don't have long enough range on their attacks, realistically. Unless, I suppose, like Constantine or some, maybe a second rank if they fit into the little gaps there, could just about get one in. But you're not going to have anywhere near as many attacks as the Skeleton Warriors. But they have a 5-up armor save, which is better than the Skeletons by standard, because their crypt shields are weird, and it's unmodifiable because Nighthaunt. So the Chain Rasp Horde will last longer statistically than the Skeleton Warriors. The Skeleton Warriors will do more damage. So you could argue having one of each, not necessarily a bad idea. But would I really use that command ability on Chain Rasp Horde when, unless my Skeleton Warriors are just completely obliterated, it's going to do more good on the Skeleton Warriors because they'll have more attacks. But there's another thing, another little variant, which I've not prepared here. If, for example, I got rid of one of my units of Skeleton Warriors and changed it to just a small unit of Direwolves to fulfill the battle line requirements, and then got rid of the Hex Wraiths, I could get a unit, 30 strong, of Grimghast Reapers. Now, they are decent. They get a 4-up save, unmodifiable because Nighthaunt. It's not quite as big a block as 40, but 30 is still decent. It's summonable, so if it is all destroyed, well, not only with it being summonable, 2 advantages. 1, I can replenish those wounds if there's any heroes in range. 2, I can, if it is destroyed, I can use a command point to bring it back at a gravesite. And the other thing is they get decent attacks. They can do quite a bit of damage. And giving them an extra attack from that command ability, yeah, that could be done. And what I could, with the points that I'd have, it would, because that would give me 30 points spare, which means I've got one of 2 options. I could either get rid of the Necromancer and change it to a Vampire Lord, which I'm not sure I would, because the Necromancer is quite good for Van Tel's Dance Macabre. Probably better to try and get that spell off than just have a command ability that gives you a +1 attack, when I might not even have the command points to use it anyway. And the alternative is a 30-point Endless spell. There's like something Palisade or something that's supposed that can be quite good. You can either you can sort of use it to protect yourself from a certain amount of shooting. So there's some variations there. Now, I have a couple of other variants on the Legions of Nagash one to sort of consider. This is still my plan at the moment, but not totally committed to it. In terms of allegiance for this, it would very much be Grand Host of Nagash. You could have this list as a Legion of Night. Now, the main advantage of Legion, each of these legions gets a couple of extra little allegiance abilities. The main advantage for this one is that you get to deploy 3 units in reserve and bring them in, but you have to bring them in close to a table edge. And I'd already abandoned this idea anyway because of canny operators. But what people tend to do in those situations, they'll just deploy loads of their cheap chaff troops across their entire battle edge, so you can't do that. So I'm not going to try and rely upon a strategy that can be scuppered by my opponent. So whereas the Grand Host of Nagash get an ability, one of the allegiance abilities is completely useless, just like it is for Legion of Night, but the other one is that it, as well as my heroes being able to regenerate wounds on summonable units, I roll for every summonable unit each turn. I just roll a die, and if I get a 5-up, I get to replenish another D3 wounds. So that's always useful. But I don't particularly. If I had complete control over the allegiance, if I could pick any allegiance that I wanted within the Legions of Nagash, I would pick Legion of Blood. And the reason for that is both of them are useful. Both of the extra little abilities are useful. One, anyone within 6 inches of one of my units would be at -1 bravery. It's always useful. Secondly, all Blood Knights and Vampire Lords, it doesn't unfortunately include the Mortarchs themselves because they don't have the Vampire Lord keyword, but it would include the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, get a bonus on their hits. I've forgotten what it is now. I think it might be, it's either +1 to hit or it's re-rolling ones when you're rolling your hit values. I've completely forgotten now, but they get some bonus, which is really useful because I have Blood Knights and a Vampire Lord, and I expect them both to do a lot of damage. But Legion of Blood, if you take any Mortarchs at all, you have to take Neferata. So I was contemplating that. So this is one variant. Again, I've been doing so many different ones of Neferata. Now you can see the problem straight away, but I'll just go through it. So it includes 2 units of Blood Knights to absolutely maximise that benefit. It does include Neferata. It includes a Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon. It includes a big old block of skeleton warriors, a small unit of direwolves, and another one that looks like a big old block of direwolves, but it's actually just 10. But, you know, they're on cavalry bases, of course. And it includes 2 necromancers. Now, ideally, of course, you're going to have this. Surely one of those necromancers would be a vampire lord. But downside with that is, I mean, it's tricky. It is tricky. Because, of course, battle line-wise, I could do it. I could just knock that unit of direwolves down to 5 and just have 2 units of 5. 30 points to upgrade one of the necromancers to a vampire lord and use the other 30 points for an endless spell. That's doable. The thing is, though, there are some really good spells in the death mages list. So the necromancers have access to a different lore to vampires, and there are some good utility ones in there, and I'd quite like to be able to use those. So that's what I was thinking there. I'm not ruling it out. I'm not ruling out the possibility of just knocking down the number of direwolves and changing a necromancer into a vampire lord, because yes, that would better use that ability if I got them and stuck into combat. So this is another possibility. The problem is I keep umming and ahhing. The other problem with doing this is with the previous list, if I just get rid of this for now, in this list with Manfred, I don't have to have, with a Grand Host of Nagash, Manfred as the general. By selecting the Vampire Lord and the Zombie Dragon as the general, which I can do, that means I get a command trait. If I have a named character as a general, the first thing you lose is a command trait. That's disappointing. The other thing is, you know, the relics are really good. The command traits are actually really good for that allegiance. Legion of Blood, both the command trait, well, I won't get a command trait, forget about that. But the artifacts are not that great. There's a few of them that, if they came in useful, would be useful, but they're quite niche. It's like some games won't really have the need for it. I might use it, but it's not really going to be that useful. There'll be other games where you'd think, oh yeah, I'm glad I had this. So I'm not huge. I'd prefer, and I understand the value in having a relic which, if you don't need it, that's fine. But when you do need it, you need it, and it could actually swing the battle for you. But I'm not even seeing too much of that in it either. The best one in it is there is one that once per battle allows you to select a hero in range, like 3-inch range, and say, right, you're not attacking or doing anything in this combat phase. Now, you could argue, if I went up against a proper nasty character like Nagash, for example, in the hopes of trying to, you know, kill it, the ability to not get a smack in the mouth back would give me certain advantages. So, yeah, there's... so it could come in useful in certain situations. So I'm not saying they're all useless, but I much prefer the ones in the other allegiance lists. Then there was another one. Now, because the other thing I was thinking of, like when I work out the damage potential Neferata and Manfred, they're actually quite similar. If you just work it out, into, like, advantages Manfred has is he has a few extra rules. For example, he can ignore the first wound. Like in terms of their survivability, both of them have a rule where, in fact, this is for all Mortarchs, if they slay any models in the combat phase, they get to restore 2 lost wounds. After that, they get another little one, but it's different for each one. So Manfred gets to ignore the first wound or mortal wound each turn inflicted on him. Neferata doesn't get that. What she gets is, if she slays a hero, so if one of the models she kills in a combat phase is a hero, she gets, rather than to replenish 2 wounds, 3 wounds. From that point of view, Manfred's is better. So a little bit more survivable, just a little bit. He also gets other ability. If he successfully casts a spell, he gets like some combat bonus. I've now gone and forgotten what it is, annoyingly. I think it might even be like +1 to hit and wound or something. I think it's quite strong. But he gets a combat bonus if he successfully casts a spell in that earlier hero phase. And then it feeds into each other, because with that extra combat prowess, if he causes any wounds, I don't think he even has to slay models. I think if he just causes wounds that aren't negated, then the next time he casts or unbinds a spell, he gets to add +1 to his roll. So there's that as well. Neferata doesn't really get any bonuses there. But what Neferata does get is one of her weapons, if it's her main weapon, if she deals any wounds with it on a model that aren't negated, but the model doesn't die, like for example attacking a hero, then you roll a die. If it's a 6, then it's slain. So it's like an instant death one. Very unlikely, but you know, it's possible. So there's pros and cons to Neferata and Manfred. If only I could take both. Which I could, but that would mean losing the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. And do you know what? I quite like the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. And I'm not, again, I wouldn't rule out taking Neferata and Manfred and not the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. But that would disappoint me. So what about a list that could have all 3? And do you know what? Let's go for it and just go mad vampire. A Soul Blight list. I'm not particularly serious about this at the moment. It would be fun to try, but I don't think it would be sensible. So a Soul Blight list could have the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, Neferata and Manfred, and 3 units of 5 Blood Knights. And that's it. I'm quite sure that against some players, this would actually crush them. But against others, I would be crushed. The big danger of elite armies, and this, surely there can be no more elite army than this. I would struggle to even believe a pure Ever-Chosen army would be as elite as this. The downside to it is, of course, that anything that runs at you and deals a load of mortal wounds, you know, you just look at it. You take, for example, okay, Sylvaneth, they put a Wildwood in the way. You'd have to avoid that like the plague. You daren't go anywhere near Wildwood with such elite units as Blood Knights. You know, I was watching today Ideneth Deepkin, and they just had a load of Morse Guard, ran forward, did their thingy with all their mortal wounds, did a load of damage. Against these, it would be hideous. And it's not just because there's very few models in it. You know, if you're wanting to know, there's 18 models in this army. Even the number of wounds is way below par. It's like 80-something wounds. Let's have a little thing. So it's 15 wounds for each of the Blood Knights. That's 45 wounds. The Vampire Lord would be 14 wounds. So that's 59. 81 wounds for this. For everything. 81 wounds. Now, 2,000 point armies that I've actually been typically generating have been round about 130 wounds for comparison. So, I mean, yeah, this is like 2/3 the number of wounds, really, isn't it? Fewer even than 2/3. So it would be in real trouble against such an army. And so I'd be relying on luck. It'd be fun. It would definitely be fun. And part of me thinks I'd really like to do this, but then the other part of me thinks, should we go with something a bit safer in the hopes that I can qualify, and then if I qualify and I go to the Grand Tournament Finals, which is a big if already, even if I'm sensible, then of course you can just, because I'm not going to win it, I can just go and take something that's going to be fun and you know, maybe. But I can't help but, because unfortunately with me, sometimes when I think, right, I've got to make a decision, I've got to have either this or this, I go, well, is there any way I can have both? And this is a way I could have both. Yeah, probably not. But anyway, that's what I'm thinking at the moment. So at the moment, I'm thinking Legion of Nagash. But there's still quite a few variants in there in terms of what I want. What I definitely know I do want is I want 2 blocks of something, which would make it much more like this one. This is why this at the moment is my template. Even though, as I say, one of those Skeleton Warriors could become Grimghast Reapers with what, you know, the Hex race effectively becoming Direwolves. I could go for that. That would be interesting. And if I'm honest, I'm probably leaning more towards that. Apart from anything else, I've been assembling some Skeleton Warriors. I'm not enjoying that, blimey. I don't really fancy 80 Skeleton Warriors. So actually having some Grimghast Reapers might be nice as well, just from an aesthetics point of view. but I would get different ones to the ones I have for my Nighthaunt, do a different colour scheme as well. This, as you can probably suggest from here, I'm going to have as more of a reddish colour scheme, you know, blood and all that. So this at the moment is my working plan. And but as we've also seen, there are variants on it, and we'll just have to decide what I decide to go with in the end. At the moment, it's a case of assembling and painting the models I know I want to take. So I know I need to take Skeleton Warriors. So once I've finished my Nurgle stuff, Skeleton Warriors, I know I want to take Blood Knights. I know I need to take some Direwolves. So those will be done. After that, I'll need to make a decision. I will need to make a decision there. So anyway, let me know what you think. As always, I will, the next one, as I say, there's still a couple of battle reports I need to sort out. So there should be quite a few videos coming up on the next month, the next week as well, sorry. And including what I've learnt from watching the Grand Tournament games that I've watched. So thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.